Recently, we reviewed the Nikon D780 DSLR. We made some bold statements about it. It truly is a combination of Nikon's best legacy DSLR and current mirrorless features in a camera that can use virtually any f-mount lens effectively. Even autofocus and face and eye detection with legacy AF lenses, which is something that the current Nikon mirrorless offerings can't even do. Today I want to talk you through some of the basics of setting up the D780 for common shooting scenarios. 3 actually. Portraits, landscape images, and less common to many than the others, astrophotography. This video is oriented towards beginners, maybe those of you who are using P or auto and want to go a little bit deeper into the settings and to see my thought process. Speaking of my thought process, there are any number of ways to set up a camera, D780 included, for any given type of photography. There is no one right way. So I am sharing with you a good way to get started, but know that you can deviate from these as your situation and your preferences change. Before I had to send the borrowed D780 back to Nikon, I recorded the menu screens for these settings. Unfortunately, I failed as a YouTuber and forgot a couple of screens in my recording. So in those cases, I will show you the same screen on my Nikon Z7. I'll mark on screen where you're seeing the Z7 menus, but remember that they are almost exactly the same in terms of what I'm going to be showing you. So I will show you some things in the menus, but I'm actually going to focus on the info screen on the D780, which is a shortcut that you can use to access and change common settings using the I button on the back of the camera. That will bring up this screen. It's quicker and easier than scrolling through the menus. For portraits, my goal with the D780 is to use eye detection. Now, since eye detection is only available in live view, the settings that I'm showing you now will be useful if you are willing to hold the camera out in front of you or use it on a tripod. If you're using the D780 through the viewfinder, you're kicking it old school by moving the camera and the focus area to get the focus on the subject's eye. And that works great also. We did that with DSLRs and SLRs for years, and I still use it often. But let's get you to set up the new feature. First, in the menu, enable eye detection. And I usually use auto ISO for portraits. It's one less thing for me to think about when working with the subject, and image noise at modest ISO settings through ISO 1600 is basically a thing of the past. So I can allow the camera to choose my ISO for me without a second thought. Then here on the info screen, set your picture control. I choose portrait or standard. For white balance, either set auto or set it to match the environment that you're in. The key to make eye detection work is to set the focus area to auto area. I know it can feel painful to do that at first, but trust me, we tested the eye detection and it works extremely well. And then set continuous focus. So as you or your subject are moving, the camera will keep focusing as long as you have the shutter release half pressed. The camera will let you use single servo focus with eye detection, but unless everything stays perfectly still, you can certainly get some out of focus shots. In the menus, we normally do our portraits and virtually everything else with 14-bit lossless compressed RAW. I have no rules on that or any other setting. However, if you want to use a different RAW option or shoot in JPEG, do it. Know that you can squeeze more out of those 14-bit RAW images when editing, but shoot as you wish. Normally for portraits, I've got the dial on the top of the camera set to A for aperture priority, and F4 is a good starting point to keep your subject in focus while creating a blurred background. If the background is closer to the subject, you may want to go to a wider aperture if your lens allows for it, f2.8 for example. If you've got the 24 to 120 millimeter kit lens, I would shoot portraits at f4 all day. On to landscapes. Similar settings, but different. I shoot landscapes both handheld and occasionally on a tripod. Either way, I'm not moving, nor is the landscape subject. So for autofocus, single servo autofocus with single point focus area. We like both the landscape and vivid picture controls. This is personal taste. I encourage you to try both. And if you shoot RAW and use Nikon Capture NXD, you can quickly change between the settings to basically decide after the fact. For landscapes, I will use active D-lighting, typically set to normal. As far as other settings, again, usually auto ISO. One less thing to think about when composing. And with the ready ability to use slow shutter speeds for landscapes, unless you're in a dark setting shooting handheld, you can normally keep ISO pretty low. If it is dark, you can use super slow shutter speeds with a tripod, again, avoiding any high ISO noise. RAW 14-bit lossless compressed. But again, if 12-bit RAW or JPEG is your thing, go for it. Shooting RAW is not mandatory. You will simply have the most latitude in post-processing. Finally, astrophotography. I'm going to focus my settings here on use of a relatively wide-angle lens, let's say 24 millimeters. With a longer lens, say 50 millimeters, you'll get less of the night sky, and the adjustment you'd want to make is a faster shutter speed than the starting point that I'll mention in a moment. Set manual focus and use the focus peaking option in the menu. Then use the LCD, not the viewfinder, to zoom in on an area of the sky with nice bright stars. Move the focus ring until those stars are as small as you can get them. Then leave the focus. Some people will even tape the focus ring into place. I use sunny white balance. Some people use tungsten. No matter what you use, you will probably be tweaking the white balance in post-processing. We usually use the dropper in Lightroom or Capture One on an empty portion of the night sky. After a few tries, we usually have it right on. For astro, we're shooting manual. For aperture, we're using the widest aperture the lens allows for, and wide aperture primes win the day here. f1.8, f1.4, those lenses rule astrophotography, but we've been successful with lenses up to f4, so use what you've got. For a 24 millimeter focal length, we start at 8 seconds. This is a little aggressive, but the stars are moving, always, because the Earth is moving. Depending on how picky you want to be, you may start to see little ovals instead of stars because of that movement. On our 61 megapixel Sony Alpha 7R4, as we approach 10 seconds, we can see the tiny star trails when we zoom into the photo. With the lower resolution sensor of the D780, you can go longer than 8 seconds, and if you're shooting wider than 24 millimeters, you can go longer also. My recommendation here is to experiment and see what works best for you, your lens, and your camera. And if you aren't using a D780, because there are considerations for different sensor sizes and such, but this video is about the D780, so let's move on. Also for astro, we turn basically everything off. Active D-lighting off. Over in the menus, we turn off long exposure noise reduction and high ISO noise reduction. I want the camera to see everything that it can, and then I experiment with noise reduction and other edits when processing. That being said, if you want to use noise reduction options, go for it. They do a great job. Often with astrophotography, we do use interval timer to make time lapses. And there are some nuances to using that with the D780 and other Nikons. And frankly, there are nuances with any camera, but the results can be truly rewarding. We'll dig into those settings for all current Nikon cameras in an upcoming video. We no longer have the borrowed D780 in our hands, but we did spend a generous amount of time with it, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have. And if I don't have the answer, we have a great community here, generally eager to help. And you know what else? As boring as this sounds, the camera manual is an absolute wealth of information. I find Nikon's manuals especially easy to understand. I download them for all of my cameras so that I can keep them handy when I have questions about my own cameras. I'll include a link to the D780 manual download page in the description of this video. But that's it for today. Like this video if you found it helpful, and subscribe if you haven't already. You can even click the bell to be notified when new videos go live. Subscribing and liking videos helps my channel a ton, so thank you to those of you that do that. And everyone, thank you for watching.